Hi there, and welcome to the top 50 films that I watched for the first time in the year 2021, ranked. Yes, I have went ahead and done the very stupid thing of trying to rank the top 50 films that I watched in 2021. Obviously, there's a few cheats, as you would expect, as far as putting more than one film in per entry. It's an interesting exercise just to see what kind of films you've been watching over the year. Again, I've kind of just, because I haven't logged my viewings on Letterboxd or anything like that, I think this is just a rough estimation of the films I've watched in 2021. Obviously, these are first time watches for me. These are not films from 2021, because if you know anything about my channel, I don't really tend to watch films the year they come out. I've got too much to catch up on in the years beforehand. And yes, I have attempted to do a rough ranking, probably from 50 to 20 are all interchangeable, and then the top 20 are the top of the bunch. But even though I've watched, in my opinion, a lot of really interesting and really fantastic films, for me there's actually only one clear winner, but we'll get to that when we get to number one. So this might take a little while. I'll try and not talk about the films too much. Obviously, a lot of these I have done videos on, because I've been so impressed by them, I've had to do a video. But again, let me know how many of these you've seen, what your favourite films that you watched in 2021, whether they were actually released in the year 2021 or the year 1963. So the first, at number 50, I'm going to cheat straight out the gate and include two films. That's The Story of Ricky-O, or Ricky-O, Story of Ricky, and Robotrix. Both these very colourful editions from 88 Films. Both films are fairly famous exploitation films that I've pretty much only recently got around to actually seeing. Ricky-O is completely demented, and it's an 18 certificate, for very good reasons as far as the amount of gore. Martial arts to the nth degree. It's very silly but a lot of fun. And then we have Robotrix, which is about female robots, which is very exploitative. There's some fairly nasty kind of rapes in the film, and lots of nudity in female robots. So that's how to start the top 50 films list, with certain kinds of bangs. And then, as you'll see, this film might be a little heavy from one country, but there's a fairly good mix. So from the gore and nudity of those exploitation films, we go to Kinoa, A Shameful Memory, which I did a recent random review of. This is a Mexican film about real life events. This is made in 1976. This is about an attack and murder of university workers in a Mexican town in 1968. It's shot in a very documentary type way. It is brutal. It's an interesting mix of fact and a little fiction. It's very visceral. It starts with a report of the events and then works its way backwards. So we're introduced slowly to the people who end up getting attacked. It's a wonderful film, but horrible, about the powers of the mob mentality, the fear of communism, and it's just a terrific film, even though it's horrible. Next is the first Italian entry. It's Big Deal in Madonna Street with Mastroianni, Mario Monicelli's wonderful heist comedy about a bunch of misfits who get together to attempt a robbery, which doesn't quite go to plan. It's just so good. Ensemble acting, a different side of Mastroianni that I've seen this year, and it's just an absolute joy. Again, I did a video on it. Excuse me. Next is another cheat. It's one of my favourite box sets of the last year. It's Arrow's Vengeance Trails, which is 4 spaghetti westerns. Massacre Time, My Name is Picos Bandidos, and God Said to Cain. These are all fun spaghetti westerns. I mean, one of them is directed by Lucio Fulci. The other one, or one of the other ones in God Said to Cain, has a starring performance by Klaus Kinski, who is usually the villain, but he plays the anti-hero in it. Wonderful extras, and a really fun box set if you're into spaghetti westerns. That's an absolute must. Next, wouldn't you know it, it's another Italian film. It's Francesco Rossi's Three Brothers. Francesco Rossi will appear in this list quite a few times, because his films blew my doors off pretty much. This is a simple tale of three brothers with three different backgrounds, three different political viewpoints come together for their mother's funeral out in the country, and deal with their father. It's a slow moving, just beautiful piece. Not my favourite Rossi, as we'll get to later, but just a classy little film. Next are two Japanese films released by Arrow. The Snake Girl and the Silver Haired Witch, which is one of those really nice slipcovers by Arrow. That kind of glossy sheen to it. And that's the original Japanese reversible artwork. This is the story of a young girl in an orphanage who gets returned to what she thinks are her natural parents, who have another daughter who lives in the attic because she has a condition. That's all I'll say about it. It has wonderful production design, there's wonderful dream sequences. It's just a lovely little film. But one notch above is Blind Beast, which Nazarin Prod did a video on as part of one of his Asian Film Mondays, so you can go check that out. I'll leave a link in the comments. I'll leave a link in the description below. This is one of those films you could have a lovely cup of tea and watch as a double bill with Cronenberg's Crash, as an artist and his muse, and it's about two people who push the boundaries of artistic expression and sexuality and pretty much everything This has amazing production design as we go into the artist's very special studio. Again, on our release you get a nice reversible artwork. But Blind Beast and the Snake Girl and the witch, the white silver haired witch even, are both fun Japanese genre films with a bit more to them. Next is The Indicator, release of Richard Dreyfuss in The Big Fix from 1978. Again, I did a random review of this. He plays a private detective called Moses Wine. It's one of those offbeat 70s detective films, but it's absolutely fantastic. Dreyfuss actually broke his wrist before they started shooting. As you'll see, he's got a cast on that picture in the front cover, and they just worked into the script, so pretty much every character he meets asks how he breaks his wrist, and he has a different response to each one. It's just a lovable little film. Again, it comes down to how much you like Dreyfuss, but he's wonderful in this film, and I would highly recommend it. It's offbeat, as you'd expect, because it's an indicator. Speaking of offbeat, we have Eating Raoul, which I finally got around to watching after all these years. A film by Paul Bartel, one of the most colourful Criterion releases. And this is an absolute gem about a couple, Paul Bartel and Mary Warnoff, who decide they can actually make money by killing people under the guise of being swingers. Again, not for everybody, but it's an absolute joy. It's only 83 minutes and it just whizzes by like a whizzy thing. Next, from Japan, from Third Window, which we'll probably see a few releases, is the Uchiha animation set, which is Burning Buddha Man and Violence Voyager. These are two mind-bending animated films with that hand-drawn and cut-out movement, which again can be a bit jarring if you're used to kind of the Pixar type of animation. These films are both wonderful, mind-bending body horrors, but absolutely fantastic. If you can pick up the set, I would highly recommend it. Then we have, speaking of 70s offbeat detectives, The Long Goodbye, Robert Altman's film Elliot Gould. I think this might have actually been the back end of 2020, but I'm counting it in here anyway. It's a nice double bill with The Big Fix of Richard Dreyfuss. Again, I'm not the biggest Robert Altman fan, but for me, my two favourites are probably Long Goodbye and McCabe and Mrs. Miller. And Elliot Gould's wonderful as a man out of time. In The Long Goodbye. Moving on, we've got another, this is Anti-Worlds, which I recently did a video of my complete Anti-Worlds, even though, as I said, they're probably a mixed bag, and I'll probably get rid of a few of them. I won't be getting rid of Dogs Don't Wear Pants, which for me is easily the best one out of this label. It's a Finnish film about a man, a surgeon, who loses his wife in a drowning accident. So he's bringing up his daughter, and to get over the grief he becomes involved with a dominatrix who pushes the boundary of his pain. He especially likes getting bags put over his head and to the near point of suffocation, and while he's in that, he kind of sees his wife and his visions of his wife. It's a beautiful film. It's not for everybody. There's strong S&M and bondage scenes. There's amateur dentistry in it. So it's not for everybody, but I actually found it quite romantic and quite moving. And it does have a heart. And that's probably why it's outstanding. Another one from Indicator. This is one from the Columbia Noir Volume 1 set. And this is The Lineup with Eli Wallach, directed by Don Siegel. This is a wonderful offbeat little story about a couple of hitmen who come to town. There's some really interesting odd deaths in the film. It just has a weird, offbeat, surrealist streak through it. Again, economic directing, as we come to expect with Don Siegel, and a great performance by Eli Wallach. And as usual with Indicator, you get a ton of really nice extras in it. Next from Olive Films, it's Pursued with Robert Mitchum, which is an example of a Western noir. This Olive edition has an introduction by Martin Scorsese, so it must be good, obviously. Robert Mitchum is absolutely fantastic. It starts at the end, where he's being hunted in a burnt out house, and we follow the events up to why he's being pursued. It's just a wonderful story, beautifully shot, and top class early Robert Mitchum performance. This in 1947, and it's a really nice release by Olive Films. If you're a Robert Mitchum fan, it's wonderful. It didn't appear in the list, but Mitchum's version of The Long Goodbye, which I should probably have included in The Long Goodbye, is really good. The one he did in the 70s. Not the version the Big Sleepy did, directed by Michael Winner, but The Long Goodbye with Robert Mitchum is actually a nice double bill with Elliot Gould. Long Goodbye. Next, again, this is a cheat. This is a 2-for-1. It's the Toshiaka Toyoda set, Volume 1 and Volume 2 from Third Window. For me, Toyoda is not quite up there with Kitano and Tsukamoto, but his films are in general excellent. Volume 1 has Pornostar, Nine Souls and Unchained, and for me 2 out of those 3 are top notch. And the Volume 2, 2005 to 2021, which just came out recently, has 2 feature length, High and Garden and I'm Flash, and it has 4 shorts: Monsters Club, Wolves Calling, The Day of Destruction, and Go Seppuku Yourselves. I actually prefer the shorts to the features in this set, but that's just me. 2 sets I would highly recommend for a fairly underseen director. That's the Toyoda sets from Third Window. Again, another cheat. I did a Kaurismäki season, which is now complete, but this Artificial Eye Kaurismäki collection I would highly recommend, because it has a bunch of his films. Again, being compared to Jim Jarmusch, Brother from Another Mother, but just really humanistic, funny, the importance of music. You have a bunch of different films in here, from realistic grim films to musical extravaganzas, from comedies to Shakespeare adaptations. Just a wonderful set and a really wonderful filmmaker. Next is Doppelganger with Kiyoshi Kurosawa. This is a wonderful Kurosawa that probably needs a Blu-ray release. If anybody knows whether it actually has a Blu-ray, you can let me know. This is a Tartan Asia Extreme DVD. It's about a scientist who ends up having a doppelganger. It does change tone with about 20 minutes to go in the film, which again might annoy some people, but I thought it worked very well. Again, I think I did a random review of this some time ago as Doppelganger. And I did a random review of this. This is Kitano's Achilles and the Tortoise. This is one of his later ones. I've still got the Seven Henchmen film to find. That's the last Kitano, and then I've seen them all. This is perhaps one of his lesser films, but it's absolutely wonderful. and beautifully colourful. Kitano pokes fun at himself again, like he does in Glory to the Filmmaker, his other one that I did a random review of, which isn't quite as good as Achilles and the Tortoise. This is about a struggling artist, played by Kitano himself, as he chases all these trends to try and sell his paintings, and his wife who struggles to put up with him. It's an absolute little gem, again, sadly underseen. Again, I just saw it this year, just tried to track it down, which was fairly expensive, just on DVD. It would be nice if we could get later Kitano and a Blu-ray box set as well. But it's just a wonderful film, and it still has that Kitano sense of humour, his wonderful editing style, and again, just sumptuous colours, as we come to expect from Kitano. Next on the Studio Canal Vintage World Cinema, speaking of colourful, Fassbinder's Lola. Again, I don't have much experience with Fassbinder. I've got the 2 Arrow box sets coming, so in 2022 I'll hopefully be digging a lot more into Fassbinder. I just love this. Again, the colours, but the kind of 50s feel, even though it was made in the late 70s, I believe. I can't actually remember when this was actually made. Possibly the late 70s, looking back at the 50s. So it has just this weird, surreal kind of production design to it. But it works so well. Armin Mueller-Stahl is fantastic. As is Mario Adorf, who's a familiar face. Just a wonderful film again. Perhaps not typical of Fassbinder, but just wonderful. Next, I did another series in 2021 in the Dardennes, which again was revelatory to me. I had seen one of them before. I think I might have seen 2 of them before. I could have picked many of them, but I'm going to go with The Child, which stars regular Jeremy Renier as a young delinquent who has a kid with his girlfriend, and to get quick money, you can pretty much guess what he does with the kid. It's just wonderful, bleak Dardenne goodness. If you watch the series, you probably know what that means. Next is Assassination by Masahiro Shinoda. This is a film that really needs a Blu-ray. Again, I did a random review of this. It's just a stunning visual feast. There's machinations and political comings and goings, but they're not perhaps as important as the main character, whose motivations come and go. It's wonderful set pieces, and it's just beautiful black and white cinematography and composition that really needs a Blu-ray to make them even pop even more. But even in this Eureka Masters of Cinema DVD, it's a stunning work from 1964. I'd highly recommend Assassination, the film, not the general life policy. Next, it's another indicator, another wonderful surprise, The Chalk Garden, which, yes, I did a random review of. Deborah Kerr as another governess, which doesn't have much luck with our governess in posts. Hayley Mills and John Mills, directed by Ronald Neame. The ending is actually quite powerful and emotional, and actually caught me off guard for some reason, but it's actually very moving. From 1964, and it's Deborah Kerr, man. As a governess, what more could you want? Next is a Bong Joon-ho film. His first one, Barking Dogs Never Bite, which is probably his least seen film. I just kind of loved it, even though it does have some difficult moments if you're a fan of dogs. As we know, Korea does eat dog meat, even though they are looking to change their policy, which is a good thing. This is about an out-of-work college lecturer becomes so annoyed by yapping dogs at his apartment complex he decides to take drastic action. Yes, it's just wonderful. But again, not for everybody. Next is Duras Hertz, The Cremator. Another wonderful second run release. We'll get to them later. This is Dark. Again, it's a wonderful film about power and how power corrupts. Again, I think I did a video on this. Next is a recent BFI release, which I did a random review of. I feel like I'm repeating myself. This is Jenny Agutter in I Start Counting. Friend of the channel Roger Kirby did a video on this quite recently as well, on the Fun City release. So I'll leave a link to that as well if you want to compare releases. The BFI release has a ton of special features, which I'm not going to go into. This is a coming of age / serial killer film, even though the serial killer aspects aren't really the most important aspects. It's about a young girl, Jenny Agutter, one of her finest performances, coming to terms with her sexuality and her feelings for her older brother. It's just a wonderful film, looks beautiful. It's a perfect example of BFI at their best, of a film that was kind of just forgotten about, directed by David Green. Next is a Jacques Becker film, Casse d'Or, starring Simone Signoret. This is set in the 19th century about a gangster's moll, essentially, and the romance she has for an ex-con who's become a carpenter, and his relationship with the gang boss. Usually wouldn't be my thing, but it's just mounted so beautifully, and how it ends really cheers me up. Next, another film that normally wouldn't be up my alley. This is Now Voyager with Bette Davis, Criterion number 1004. Again, this is what they called a woman's picture in the olden days. Came out in 1942, about a spinster wallflower who is transformed into the wonderful Bette Davis. Again, it's a film that I shouldn't love, but it's just fantastic. I think I did a review of this. If I didn't, one of the things that is quite annoying is the Max Steiner score. It's a bit over the top and melodramatic, but the film is just fantastic, even though it really shouldn't be. Next is Criterion Spy number 840, the Spanish film The Executioner. Again, which I did a video on. This is a black comedy about somebody taking the post of state executioner and not necessarily actually wanting to do it. It's a bit farcical at times, but it's making so many political points about fascism and good old Franco. It's well worth seeing, and that is a nice Criterion cover. Unfortunately, my Criterion copy was a bit damaged when I got it on eBay. Next, something completely different. It's another Criterion. Spy number 1024, Destry Rides Again, which is a western but also takes on the conventions of a western and actually subverts the western. Marlena Dietrich is absolutely fantastic. She gets down and dirty and kind of ridicules her own image a bit. James Stewart, in a very interesting performance from 1939. It's a western, but it's also kind of an examination on stuff like the gun craze in westerns, and various other things, but it's a whole lot of fun while it's kind of deconstructing what it's actually built on. Next, I went on a bit of a Joseph Losey trek in 2021 as well, and Mr. Klein might be my favourite one. It's a later Alain Delon, so he does look a little jaded, which is ideal for the role. Set during the Second World War in Paris. He's pretty much taking advantage of Jewish people who sell their property and their artefacts so they can get money to get out of the country. So he kind of takes advantage of them. But then he ends up having a doppelganger, and he is under suspicion of being a Jew himself, which he denies. And he's trying to catch this doppelganger who's going about with the same name until it's too late and he doesn't even know it. It's just a beautiful film. It has that kind of washed out, it's a little bit like a Jean-Pierre Melville as far as the look, that chilly kind of atmosphere. I mean, personally, I think Losey's best films are when he tries not to be quote unquote arty-farty. When he goes arty-farty, I think he loses what he's good at. And this is the perfect balance. Nice little cameo by Jean Moreau, but it's nice to see it getting a Blu-ray. I bought a DVD set, and then the Studio Canal went on a Crazy Joseph Losey on Blu-ray release spurge, which is really good. Maybe not for your wallet. I would highly recommend Mr. Klein. Next is An Arrow Academy. This is Borowicz's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Miss Osborne, which I think I did a double take video with the Hammer Sister Hyde film. This stars Udo Kier as Dr. Jekyll. This has a unique kind of transformation sequence. It just looks wonderful. It has that kind of hazy, as if it's shot through lace kind of look. Ton of special features, and it's just one of the slightly more odder takes on the famous story. Then we get to The 10th Victim, and yes, that is Ursula Andress with a brassiere that fires bullets. This is Elio Petri, who again, along with Francesco Rossi, were my discoveries of the year really. This is his science fiction social satire film where war has ended but people still need to kill each other, so for $1 million you play the victim 5 times and you play the hunter 5 times, and if you survive the 10 rounds you win $1 million. This has tons of satirical points, tons of stuff which is still relevant. You know, their kills are sponsored by these companies who make tea and stuff. They want to sponsor murders essentially. It also stars Mastroianni, stunning blonde hair. This is the Shameless Blu-ray and DVD release, which I would highly recommend. It just blew me away. It's just so good. But it's not even Petrie's best film, but more of that later. And then from The 10th Victim to Butt Boy, I think there's 2 epochs of your life. Before you see Butt Boy and after you see Butt Boy. Butt Boy may indeed be a way of life. I really need to pick up on Blu-ray. It's a film that just shouldn't work. You think it's just going to be a stupid joke about a guy who puts objects up his butt. It's kind of the reverse of Swallow, the film that's coming out on Second Sight Special Edition quite soon, or is out now I think. But this plays like Seven, where the cop is hunting the guy who's putting things and perhaps people up his bottom. Again, shouldn't work. And if you go with it, it's actually a very good kind of Michael Mann inspired detective thriller. And in the end, it's actually quite moving. Not just in the Bill sense, but in the true cinematic feeling sense. Again, a film that should not work, but it literally will blow you away. And from Butt Boy, we get to Vampire Kawatachuk by Per Portabella. Now, this is a film that Chris Mohan first talked about, and it's his fault that I ended up watching it. It's a film that you can't really understand, even after you've watched it. It's the silent film of Dracula that was shot using Jess Franco's actors on the set of his Dracula film, but Portabella shoots them out of makeup, in makeup, between shots, in shots. It's silent, but it's either one of the worst films you've ever seen in your life, or it's one of the best interpretations of the Dracula myth you'll ever see. He deconstructs cinema itself, but still loves cinema. So you'll see the technical crew prepping with a fog machine, but then when you see the carriage going through the fog, through the woods, you completely forget that you just saw the people set it up. Because it captures the magic of cinema, the wonder of cinema, even though you've just seen the deconstruction of how they actually do it. It's a film that if you told me you hated it and it's the worst thing you've ever seen, I wouldn't have an argument for it. But if you also said it's one of the best versions of Dracula you've ever seen as well, I would agree wholeheartedly. And at the end of the day, that's what cinema's about. People can watch different interpretations of what they've actually watched. It's only about 70 minutes long. If it was any longer, it would probably be excruciating. So that kind of sums up my 2021, Butt Boy and Vampire Kawatachuk. But there's more. So back to the Dardennes and the Sun, or Le Fils, which is a slight cheat because I'm sure I saw this years and years and years ago. Again, this is Dardenne at their best. It's just a wonderful film about a man who, Olivier Gourmet, another Dardenne regular, who works in a technical college teaching troubled teens, and a boy comes in to start, and he starts acting very strangely about him and around him. And again, in typical Dardenne fashion, you don't know why, you're not told why, it's just up to you to follow what happens. It's just another wonderful Dardenne film. Again, I could have included a lot more Dardennes in here. Next, it's another Jacques Becker. It's Le Trou, which might be my favourite prison break film of all time. I know prison break films can sometimes be pretty monotonous and pretty by the numbers. But this, along with Bresson's A Man Escaped, just does it in such an interesting and fascinating way. We're almost there for every single chip of concrete. It has an amazing ending. Sadly, Becker didn't live much past this. Just a tremendous, tremendous film without giving too much away. Next is another one that was brought up by Nazim Prod. It's Privilege by Peter Watkins. Just a stunning film about not just the music industry, but how the music industry is used for political means. Again, as we say, with so many films from the 60s and 70s, still relevant today, sadly. We kind of wish they weren't. So colourful, a great performance by Paul Jones. He said, desperately looking at the back to remember what his name was, from Manfred Mann. Just, again, can't really describe how good it is. You kind of just have to go and watch it yourself. And another wonderful Peter Watkins film. Next up, another Criterion and another Dardenne. It's La Promesse. Not necessarily their debut, because they made 2 films before this, which you can't really get, but this is their debut as far as they'd reached rock bottom and they wanted to go forward with the Dardenne way of making films, which, as we know, is kind of different from everybody else, or quite a lot of people. It's just drop you in it and you figure it out. This is about a father and a son who are involved in the illegal immigration business, and the decisions they both have to make and their relationship with each other, and how that changes by one event. It's just an absolute stunner. This was kind of my first, well, I had watched 2 days, 1 night beforehand, but actually doing the season, this was my first view of it, and just kind of blew me away. Next, it's another Third Window, and yes, it's another film that I did a random review of. It's Melancholic, which is just absolutely wonderful. It's about a university dropout who gets involved in this bathhouse, which happens to be a place where Yakuza execute people, and that's as much as I'll go into. But again, the reason why I love this so much is the fact it's got a heart. You know, there's so many films that give violence and go for the black comedy, but they don't actually have anything to say particularly about the relationship between killer and victim, between the people around and the effects of the people of that violence. But this is a 3-dimensional film. Yes, it's got violence in it. Yes, it's about killing essentially, but it's got a heart, and that's, to me, what elevates films of that nature. Next, well, from now on in, we're getting to 5-star films for me. We're getting to the cream of the crop as far as what I've watched in 2021. Of course, that's just my opinion, and my opinion, as we have well established, is not fact. So it's another Criterion. It's number 610, which was recommended by John Sayles. It's The Organizer, starring Marcello Mastroianni, by Mario Monicelli. Yes, we're going to start a run of Italian films. This is from 1963, and it's another side of Mastroianni that I wasn't really used to or aware of, where he plays a kind of beat down professor who kind of organises unions. It's set in Turin and factory, textile factories, and it's absolutely wonderful. As we get to know the characters, the effects of going on strike, breaking strike, how it affects the company, how it affects the workers, how it goes to reaches ahead, how it affects scabs, how it affects, it's absolutely magnificent, but it's still funny, dramatic. There's moments that are heart-poundingly tense. Mastroianni is, even though he's the star, he lets everybody else do what they've got to do. He doesn't hog the limelight in any way. It's just a magnificent film. This is a Region A Blu-ray. I'm not sure I don't think it's available on Region B anywhere. But if you've got a multi-region player, I would highly recommend The Organizer because it's fantastic. Next up is another Criterion. It's Spy Number 1043. Again, I did a video on it. Sound like a broken record. This is Christ Stopped at Eboli, from 1979 by Francesco Rossi, who has battled Elio Petri throughout the year as being my favourite director of the year. This is the full 220-minute version, which was on television. This is another one of those films very much like Vampire Kiadachuk that you can't really describe why it's so fantastic. Gian Maria Volonté, in a quiet performance, is a political exile who comes to this small town in the back end of nowhere where they send political exiles, even though they can't speak to each other. Because he's a doctor, but he hasn't really practiced, once word gets out that he's a doctor, the community kind of asks for his help. But that's not really anything to do with the plot. He just kind of wanders about town, meeting people, talking to people. Again, 220 minutes, you think, why is this so good? I don't know why, but it is. Beautiful countryside, subtle, wonderful performances, still has points to make about fascism and politics in general, but never rammed down your throat or anything. Just a stunning film at 220 minutes that you still want to stay for longer. You still want to be with these characters for another 220 minutes. But can you explain it? Can you write it down in a mathematical formula of why this film is so good? No, and that is the beauty of cinema. Oh, another Italian film. Oh, another Francesco Rossi film. It's Lino Ventura, Max von Sydow, and Illustrious Corpses, which again I did a random review of. Again, Roger Kirby did not a random review. He did a review of. This one has the bonus of a commentary by Alex Cox. And a commentary by Alex Cox is always welcome. This is about some judges that are getting murdered, and Lino Ventura investigates. I'm not going to go into too much detail of the plot, but it's just absolutely wonderful. Lino Ventura is fantastic. Made in 1976, it has one of the best openings of a film, and it has one of the best endings of a film. And having a commentary by Alex Cox is a wonderful bonus. Illustrious Corpses, fantastic. And again, one of the best titles in art history, I think. Oh, it's another Italian film. Oh, it's another Criterion. It's 682. It's not Francesco Rossi, controversially. It's Elio Petri. And Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, which in its own way is one of the best titles of all time. This is another great Gian Maria Volonté, who I feel I should really apologise to, because really before this year I didn't appreciate how great an actor he was, because I was just so used to him in the Dollars trilogies and Bullet for the General and kind of being a little bit over the top. But some of these films that I've seen this year, he's just so good, and there's more to come, spoiler alert. Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, great score by Morricone, and this is a reverse The Trial by Kafka. This is about a police officer who gets off by reenacting murders with his girlfriend. And he commits a crime, and he spends the rest of the film trying to convince the authorities that he did it, not that he didn't do it. And of course they just don't believe him because he's an authority. It's just amazing. It looks fantastic, sounds fantastic. There's so much going on. There's a wonderful interrogation sequence in it. It's just absolutely fantastic. And again, one of the kick-off points of my little Italian detour this year. Next is the second film by Juraj Herz. Again, this was first talked about by Chris Mohan. And it's Beauty and the Beast, or the alternate cover, The Virgin and the Monster. We've seen Beauty and the Beast so many times, but this blew my bloody doors off. For years and years and years, the Jean Cocteau version was my favourite version. When I did my favourite 150 films last year, it was in. But this version is, I'm struggling not to call this my favourite version of it now. And congratulations on Second Run for releasing this. It is stunning. It's one of those films that within the first 5 minutes I knew that I was going to be in for something special. Again, it's the story that we all know, but it's mounted completely differently. The Beast is completely different, and I like the fact that Second Run did not put the Beast on the back or gives any hint of what the Beast is going to be like, because you have to go into it blind. And the Beast is disturbing and scary, which you can't really call Jean Marais' interpretation or version of it in Cocteau's film particularly terrifying and creepy and scary and disturbing. This one is, but again, that's the Czech New Wave for you. Just a stunning film, and one of those that I would implore you to go out and buy, because it's just stunning. Next is, it's an Italian film, and it's an Elio Petri film. Its property is no longer a theft, which again, great title. This is the Arrow Academy. This is, as by my rankings, I think my favourite Petri. It's just another wonderful political satire without bashing it over the head of a bank employee who has the nice touch of being allergic to money, which is a nice statement. And he's jealous of the local butcher who has all this money and all the connections, so he goes about trying to take away everything that he has. Enlists the help of an aging thief. It's just an absolute blast. Again, it's got a great score by Morricone, even though there's not much of it, but it's kind of quirky and kind of awesome. Again, it's hard to describe, but it is just an absolute blast. Again, it's fun, but it also has so many points to make about capitalism and consumerism, but again, without being heavy-handed. It's a top-class Elio Petri joint. Next is, it's another Italian film. It's another Francesco Rossi film. It's Uomini Contro, or Many Wars Ago, starring Gianmario Volonté. For years, I thought Paths of Glory was the best World War I film, but I have now changed my mind. I love Paths of Glory. That was in my top 150. But Many Wars Ago is simply sensational. Made in 1970. It's about, well, it's an Italian film about Italian soldiers in World War One in the Pyrenees. No doubt many of the people who worked in the film had relatives that fought there and died there. So you just have a much more realistic feel. There's much more authenticness. I mean, Past the Glory is fantastic for many reasons. But for me, Many Wars Ago is better. I know that's just opinion, and my opinion is not fact, as we have well established. But this is just stunning. It's got great music by Piero Piccinino, which is not his name. Piccioni, who's a common collaborator of Francesco Rossi. It's a stunning film. Again, I don't want to go into details. Yes, it has some of the tropes that Past the Glory and many other films, war films, have. But there's something that's quite transcendental about it. It transcends war films at times. It's full of surprises, even with the kind of tropes. And it's just an absolutely beautiful film. I tracked it down in DVD, and then I realised there's actually a Blu-ray of it, so if you can pick up the Blu-ray, please do so. It looks fantastic. There's a half an hour interview with Rossi about the restoration in the film. Yeah, I mean, my Rossi and Elio Petri journey has been absolutely eye-opening and fantastic. That's pretty much been the highlight of my 2021, getting into these two filmmakers, and Monicelli as well, and Moretti. Perhaps not people's first go-to Italian directors, but they are totally in my wheelhouse. And then where are we? Number 4? Somewhere in that region. Orlando. This is one of those films that just absolutely blew me away. I remember it coming out in 1992. Never saw it at the time. Probably wouldn't have appreciated it at the time either. This is Sally Potter's absolute sumptuous masterpiece with Tilda Swinton. Over a 400-year period, as a man who turns into a woman halfway through for no real reason. There's no explanation, we don't need one. And the attitudes of society towards that transformation, it just looks absolutely stunning. Please, if you're going to watch it on Blu-ray, watch it on the largest screen possible, because it's just absolutely stunning. The production design, Tilda Swinton's performance is just arguably her best, and she is pretty good in my opinion. Just an amazing film. Next is Spy Number 1009, Holiday, with Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. Again, I might have actually watched this last year, but I'm putting it in again just because it's so awesome. Directed by George Cukor. The year before, the same director and the same stars had the hit with the Philadelphia Story. Not Philadelphia, the AIDS film with Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. That's a different film. To me, this is way better than Philadelphia Story. It's completely predictable about Cary Grant, who's going to marry the popular capitalistic daughter of a rich man, and Katharine Hepburn's the black sheep of the family. Oh, I wonder how that's going to work out. It works out exactly what you think, and it doesn't matter, because the chemistry between Grant and Hepburn, the sheer fizz of the script, it doesn't matter that it's completely predictable. The Criterion edition has the 1930 edition of the film as well, which is interesting because that's a more stagier version of it, because it did come from a stage play, and it lacks the star power, perhaps. Well, certainly the star power of Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. It's an absolute blast, and again, it's a perfect example of a film that it does not matter that it's predictable and you know exactly which direction it goes. Doesn't matter. It's just gold. And at number 2, again, I'm going to cheat because it's pretty much the whole of Tsukamoto's back catalogue, which again I'd seen some a long time ago. This is the second edition of the Arrow box set, so it doesn't have the book, but you do have Kotoko killing Tetsuo in Tetsuo 2, Tokyo Fist, Bullet Ballet, Snake of June, and the most important one is Vital, which, well, for me is probably my favourite Tsukamoto, even though it's quite hard. But that is actually on Blu-ray, which, as far as I'm aware, it's the only place you can get Vital on Blu-ray. All great films. Again, Third Window has a bunch of them. Tokyo Fist. That's Killing, and a couple of shorts. Snake of June. I should say the Arrow edition has the short films as well. Tetsuo 1 and 2. They also have Fire in the Plains, which isn't an Arrow box set. Kotoko. Gemini, which is a masterwork as well. And yeah, like I said, Fires in the Plain, which Third Window has, but the Arrow box set does not. And the Arrow box set is region A, I believe. Some of them might be multi-region. So that's number 2. So I don't know whether you guess what number 1 is. It's a film that had been in my backlog for a little while due to the running time. It's not Human Condition, because that was last year, and Human Condition, we all know how fabulous that is. But this was a film that literally my jaw was open for the whole 7 hours of its runtime. It's not Italian, if you can believe that. It's Russian, and it's War and Peace from 1966. Now, I did a video of it. Sadly, the lip sync was out of order, but that doesn't really matter, because what I say about the film is of no importance whatsoever. It's just go watch the film. It's 422 minutes of opulent gorgeosity. People talk about films being good looking. War and Peace is literally 422 minutes of oil paintings stuck together. The Napoleonic Wars, the Napoleonic War paintings that you see in museums, that's what the film's like. You can literally sit with the pause button on every single frame. I've often talked about one of the reasons I love Kurosawa so much is you can literally press the pause button in these films, and due to these compositions, you can print them off and stick them in an art gallery. War and Peace should just be shown in an art gallery on a loop. The siren's going off just because I'm holding up War and Peace, because it's just absolutely amazing. And we have to thank King Vidor, and Audrey Hepburn and Henry Fonda, because if Hollywood hadn't made their version, the Russians wouldn't have been so annoyed by it that they went full blast to make the 1966 version. It's the most expensive Russian film ever made at the time, and probably still is. They opened up 58 state museums so they could get the props that were actually of the time to make it as authentic as possible. Sergei Bondarchuk, who also stars in the film, who directed it, was obviously a madman. Apparently he suffered a few heart attacks while making the film. You can see why. The sequence of the burning of Moscow, they built a replica Moscow and set it on fire, and then they're literally shooting in the fire, There's no CGI fire in 1966, obviously. I could talk about the film all day long, but I won't put you through that, because you'd be better off just watching the film. It's just a stunner. And even though lots of these Elio Petri films and Francesco Rossi films and Tsukamoto films and all these films in this list, I have enjoyed this year immensely. War and Peace is just gobsmacking. I mean, it's split into 4 pieces. A bit like Human Condition, it's kind of chopped up a little bit, so you don't have to sit for 7 hours in one sitting. But it is just absolutely stunning. Watch it on as big a screen as possible. On Blu-ray, it's just ridiculous. It's a 2K restoration. I can't imagine what a 4K restoration would be like. Your eyes would probably pop out your head on a 4K. Excuse me. It literally is that cartoon of the eyeballs coming out and then going back in again for every single frame. So that's my number 1 film that I watched for the first time in 2021. Again, thanks very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for being part of this channel over last year, or over 2021 and the 2 years before that. The community makes all of our channels better, perhaps not the health of our wallets. So I want to thank everybody who's ever subscribed or ever commented. It means a lot, because obviously I talk a load of nonsense. And again, my opinion is not fact, but go out and buy as many copies of War and Peace as you can, or go out and rent a museum and put up a massive screen and just play it on a loop. So thanks so much for watching. Please let me leave in comments your top 50 films that you watched for the first time in 2021 down in the comments below. And hopefully you join me again in 2022 for more videos. This is Saul Chironin from Saul Chironin Films, saying farewell.